Welcome to Hello Chaos, a weekly podcast exploring the messy and chaotic minds and lives of founders, entrepreneurs, and innovators. We talk to founders from all different industries, different company stages of all shapes and sizes. We hear real, raw, and unbiased founder stories and why our mantra is where aha meets oh shit. We drop new episodes every Sunday, so make sure to subscribe to get those alerts and be inspired every week. Hello Chaos is one of many resources brought to you by Orange Whip. That's Orange Whip, WIP. That stands for Work in Progress. Orange Whip is a multimedia company dedicated to serving founders and entrepreneurs in affiliate cities across the country through hyperlocal media platforms that are designed to inform, inspire, and create connections to help founders succeed. Orange Whip is an all in one content hub for founders with fresh and engaging stories, curated calendars, and local dynamic roadmaps to help founders navigate their local entrepreneurial ecosystem. We've done all the hard work for founders, so they only need to go to one trusted place to find the local information they need. We're in 3 South Carolina cities today, looking to expand in 2024. My name is Jennifer Sutton. My friends and family call me JJ. I am the founder of Orange Whip and will be your host today. We have Kamber Parker, the founder of the Yo Pro No. Welcome, Camber. Welcome to Hello Chaos.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited that you're here too. So first off, I want to hear all about your journey, but you got to tell me about the name.
Oh man. Well, I will say so I just got married recently. So my name I'm going by Camber Parker Bowden now. So I do have a new last name. So that's
Uh-huh.
kind of exciting. First time I'm saying that. But
Well,
my name is a
congratulations.
thank
Congratulations.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. My first name, Camber, is a family name. And are you interested in hearing the Yo Pro No name background as well, or were you
Yes.
referring to my first name?
Both.
Well, first name is family name. Really kind of long story there, so I won't go into depth there, but it's a really cool, meaningful story that happy to share with anybody who's interested one day. And then the Yo Pro No, short for Young Professionals in the Know, started
Ah,
as a blog back in 2018, and I had this idea for a long time prior to 2018, and I didn't like calling young professionals yuppies, and
yeah.
I like Yo Pro. It seemed just kind of fun and innovative and very future oriented, and so it just kind of stuck. And that I've kept the name. I've had a lot of people over the years tell me maybe you should consider changing the name, the brand. And I think it's maybe sometimes hard for people once they first hear it, but once you know it, it's
Yeah.
catchy, you remember it, and so it's here to stay, at least for right now.
That's right. That's right. You put meaning behind it. So is the Yo Pro No, is that your first business that you founded?
First business, it started as a blog in 2018, as I mentioned, and it was my side hustle for 4, 5, I guess 5 total years before I took it full time in July of 2022.
Oh,
So first
wow.
business, and it's the first business, but it's gone through so many different iterations, so many different business models, and so it feels like it's maybe been more than one, but it is one as of now.
Well, tell us about your entrepreneurial journey of what have been those evolutions and those like mini pivots, and why did
Such a
you
good
what
question.
and what inspired you to start? So start us there. Like, what inspired you to really start the company?
Yeah, so I'm a young professional myself. I am 28. I'm a proud millennial. And my first job after college, I am from Baltimore originally, but I came
Okay.
down south to go to Furman University. And right after I graduated, I moved to Chattanooga, Tennessee, where I worked for a Fortune 250 insurance company. It was, 10,000 people. I wanted to climb the corporate ladder. That was always my goal. And I showed up, and that first year was miserable. It
Oh, wow.
was what started the blog for me, because in those first few months, I was like, all right, something's not right. I was talking to my peers. No one in their early 20s was thriving. Everybody
Ah,
was job hopping. Everybody was like kind of miserable. They were like, we just don't really feel like we know what's going on. And
okay.
so I felt like there was there was a need because it wasn't just me that was going through this, it was my peers. And so I was like, all right, it can't just be my peers. I need to talk to other people. And so that
Yeah.
was what actually started the blog. And so I graduated college in 2017. About 8 months later, I started interviewing young professionals from across the country. So that was what the blog was. So every
Okay.
week for 2 years, I launched a new blog post. And back in the day, we straight up, I had an audio recording and then we transcribed it. It was so not efficient, and I wish I could go back and change things. But that was for 2 years, and it started catching steam. People were paying attention. We had social media channels for all of the for each platform, and we would post the interview of young professionals sharing raw, real stories about what made them feel fulfilled at work, what
Hmm.
made them successful, what really drove them to succeed. And 2 years in, I was doing a lot of this on the weekends, on early mornings, late evenings. And after a year at that corporate insurance company, I actually moved back to Greenville, and I
Okay.
worked in nonprofit fundraising for 4.5 years. So I know it was a very big pivot, going from a very large company to a two-person company, but I had interned for this nonprofit when I was in college. And I had a connection to Parkinson's disease. So it was the Greenville Area Parkinson's Society. So I
Okay.
was very passionate about it. But in that time, I was able to really build up this blog. And so right around 2020, when everything in the world was going
Exploded.
great, right, chaos, I really, that was my moment where I was like, all right, I can either choose to monetize this and move forward because
Hmm.
this is my passion, this is what I love. And it's evolving. I had a lot of mentors at the time say, you can use this data that you're collecting, because
Right.
at this point, you've posted about 100 interviews after 2 years. What are they telling you? What are these young people telling you? And
Right.
so from there, and I can go on. I know I've said a lot already, but that was really the first iteration, was just a blog. It was a lot of intake. It was a lot of, let's see what people are interested in. And in that first year, we started getting thousands of views on our website and our social media channels, and I realized there was something there. Um, and so that's when we started monetizing, but probably not in the way that you would imagine. So I'll pause there just to see if you have any
Yeah.
questions, and then I can dive in more.
No, that's fascinating. So I'm curious. So here you were doing all this, um, like, and the company, the insurance didn't know. Were they not interested in, um, un- getting the information you're uncovering? Were they?
So at the time, I mean, it's really funny. There's a lot of like just full circle moments
Yeah.
where, 7 years later, I'm actually talking to several people at the company now to potentially have some collaboration in the future.
Okay.
At the time, I was not sharing this because I was miserable in what I was doing there. I was
Yeah.
not showing like, hey, I have this blog. It doesn't make any money and I'm not an expert, but I was not ready to share what I was doing with the
Okay.
company. So I ended up leaving 10, 11 months in that first job, which, I'm part of that statistic that about every young professional before the age of 30 on average will have 4 jobs.
Oh
And
yeah.
so for me, I hit, and that's a Forbes stat. So for me, spent 10 months working in corporate, 4.5 years in nonprofit. Now I'm in my entrepreneurial venture, which I hope is the end game for me. Maybe not one company, but I love, once you go entrepreneur, like it's hard to
It's
go
hard to
back.
go
And
back.
so
Yeah.
and so I was never at that point where I was ready to share that. But why I left, and a lot of people ask me, why did you leave that
Yeah.
first job? Like, what was it? And it's what I help companies with all the time now. It is communication and expectations. That is hands down what we hear from young professionals all over the
That's what I was going to
country.
ask you. Is that
Mhm.
what? Because you said that you were not the only one at this company that was miserable.
Mm-mm. Oh no.
So
Most people that were there in my little cohort at the beginning no longer work for that company. There's a
yeah.
couple, but most people don't. And I would say I look around at my peers who are all in their late, like friends who are in
Right.
their late 20s, and none of us are at our first job. Some of
Yeah.
us are at our third or fourth jobs,
Oh
and
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's normal. But again, going back to that first job, I realized something. Maybe I didn't see the full picture at the time, but my
Right.
22-year-old self, I was like, something is not adding up. Like, why are we seeing this generation, the millennials and now Gen Z, not super engaged so that they're job hopping, they're leaving? What is it? And
What is it?
that's what I uncovered to find. Oh my gosh, so we've got a ton of resources on this, but what we have found, and we released a large report this year,
Okay.
called "The Current State of Young Professionals Today." It's on our website, and next year we're actually gearing up to release 4 different reports. So we've got so data is really the core of what we do. So ever
Okay.
since that blog, we have now interviewed over 5,000 young professionals since
Wow.
2018, and so we use data to support all of the workshops and trainings that I do, all of our consulting services. And so what we find, and really what we base all of that on when we work with clients and companies, is communication and expectations is number one. That
Okay.
ultimately is going to be the top reason that young people are going to leave, and that is 21 to 39 is a young professional by
Right. Right. Right.
definition. Number two is culture.
Yeah.
Or excuse me, is meaningful work. We're going to go to culture in a second.
Okay.
That's number three. Young people really, they want to make an impact. They'll take a pay cut if it means that they can really feel like they're making an impact at work. That's different than previous generations.
Yeah.
When you look at data, culture is number three. Professional development is number four. Are you offering career advancements, ways to help set them up for future success and
Right.
leadership? And then five is onboarding and education. So if
Mm.
you start onboarding poor, the chances of them staying are going to be much lower. So that's
Right.
what we found in our research.
Okay. So talk to me about communication expectation. Is that, and because to me I think that's linked to onboarding and education.
It absolutely is.
Okay.
Communication. So onboarding is a lot of other things other than communication and
Okay.
expectation. So think of communication and expectations as the the crux of how the workforce moves, right? We
Right.
have intergenerational communication. That is the most popular, top requested topic that we go in and speak to companies on.
Mm.
And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think people are really hungry for this because they're realizing that there is a barrier between different generations when they communicate.
Yeah.
Onboarding, I look at in a different light. I mean, intergenerational communication should be a part of onboarding, but onboarding can look like, let's make sure that the length of this onboarding is appropriate. So we see a
Okay.
lot of clients who will onboard in 2 weeks,
Yeah.
and these young people are saying, we're not ready to take this on. Um, we're not ready and not set up for success right away. And so we actually found in that report that young people want at least 3 months of onboarding before they feel confident and ready to actually apply what they've learned in that
Yeah.
education period. So it's different. But what I like to say when I talk to people from all different generations is the 5 areas that I just mentioned might not seem that different from what you as an experienced professional, again, in these engagements that I'm in, typically I'll have a lot of people question that. You might not see something that's super different. It's how different generations define each of these
Yeah.
areas. So a young professional, a Gen Z member, is going to look at communication very differently than the baby boomer boss in the
Yeah.
room. And so learning what those different communication styles are really makes a big difference.
Is that more in terms of like older generations more formal email versus the younger generation is more like Slack, Teams, chat? Or is it when you say communication like that style, or is it literally in um, the words, the tone, the language?
That's a great question. So, what we look at when we look at communication is one, does everybody on the team, doesn't matter how old you are, do they know what the other people on their team's number one communication style is?
Okay.
What we have found is, I don't call them older professionals, they're experienced professionals if
Yeah.
you're 40 plus. What we have found is experienced professionals will say, well, they just don't want to come into work anymore. They don't want that in-person communication. There's a lack of understanding. And then you have the young professionals, right? The Gen Zers, the millennials, who are like, they just don't know how to use technology. that's a barrier because
Yeah.
we're making these assumptions. And I have people when I speak or when I go and work with a client, I'll have baby boomer bosses who are like, I text more than this 25-year-old in the office. So it doesn't matter what, like, our data can only go so far. What I always
Right.
encourage people is you've got to ask what the communication styles are on your team. It's something that I have to practice constantly with my own team because I know what I like,
Yeah.
but it doesn't always work and translate well to team members that are in different generations. And
Yeah.
also people like one of my director of operations, I mean, she's 10 years older than me. We're in the same generation, but we have very different communication styles. And so we have to kind of debunk some of those myths. And
Right.
that's what we're finding in the workplace right now through all of our research, is that it's just not happening. And so that's really what we're talking about when we talk about communication.
Okay. That's fascinating. Because um, as an agency, my other company I'm a marketing firm, right? So
Right.
I've got the media company, which for the most part, we're all kind of, we're like-minded when it comes to more
Mhm.
skill set type of stuff, content generators, content producers.
Yeah.
But in the agency, you've got different, you got account people, very type A.
Mhm.
That has to communicate with creatives,
Yep.
who are very, in the gray, and not just communication styles, but just work styles.
Yeah.
And so, we try to talk about that of like, trying to create consistent, I think, rules of engagement. So at
Mhm.
least everyone knows the devices, everyone knows the
Right.
the tools we use, but then
Mhm.
just a little reminder of, if you expect some like these type of people to be as, um, I don't know, I'm called just anal, very
Uh-huh.
anal on like an OCD when it comes to deadlines. Da, 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 da. They're
Right.
not. That's just not
Right.
like, and you don't want that from
Mhm.
the creative. So, just even trying to teach, especially younger people, just like how the dynamics of creatives versus non-creatives, and how do
Mhm.
you bridge that gap. And I'm sure, and I know every company has those type of, I would say, the pockets of people.
Mhm.
Um, in different departments, that do things.
Yeah.
But yeah, but no, that was kind of my lessons learned over the last couple of years, of there is a difference between orientation and onboarding. And we've
Mhm.
had to break that up to go,
Mhm.
this is what they need to do. What we call onboarding is, have we armed them with all the information to just basically do the basics of their job,
Mhm.
you know, how to open the office, how to like, what are your tools and devices, what are your passwords, what's the tech
Mhm.
stack that we use,
Right.
here's the team, here's what we do as a company. And then
Mhm.
we have orientation that goes, I want to say 12, it's like 12 weeks. So yeah, I
That's
guess about
great.
3 months,
Yeah,
but it's an
that's wonderful.
orientation of, now this is how we serve. This is it's really more educational modules
Mhm.
of, um, and it's not necessarily how to do your job. It's just more of getting you comfortable with in the marketing space, right?
Yeah.
How to have
Mhm.
conversations with clients, and knowing what these types of people do on our team, so you
Mhm.
have more comfortability around that.
Right. And
Because we were expecting it to be like, well, here, this is what we do, just kind of learn, because that's how we grew up, of, we
right.
just learned on the job, and we were, you sink or swim. And
Mhm.
that's the thing that I've noticed in the last, like, especially the last 5 years
Mhm.
of, and it doesn't matter. It's like the 20 something, we've seen the 30 somethings and the early
Right.
40, like, they, they aren't, um, they don't feel as comfortable just diving in. Like,
Yeah.
you need to have, and that's part of the culture. That's part of, how do we get people to thrive? But that's been a big lesson learned for me as a founder, um, trying to grow our own company. That
Yeah.
was,
Thank you for sharing. Can I chime in with a couple of
yes,
thoughts?
please.
Just
Yeah.
because what we really have found with onboarding, with really everything that you just touched on, is authenticity is really the first step. So onboarding and sharing passwords, giving them the basics, it's important, right? But
Right.
it's being honest. So I always tell clients, in your onboarding period, be brutally honest. Tell them,
Yeah.
here's a real life example of something that might happen.
Right.
We don't want you to find out the hard way. We want to
Right.
show you what our team has done in the past to figure out and hopefully help you react better when it happens again, because it
Right.
it very well might. And so we really push that kind of story element, because that's really obviously the root of the Yo Pro No and who we are. It's all story based and kind of data driven from these young people who have shared their experiences the
Yep.
past 5.5 years. So we really come at it from a story perspective. And another piece, you mentioned, we see this with people in their 20s, their 30s, their
Yeah.
40s, et cetera. It doesn't matter how old you are. We really try not to put people in boxes as much as, let's just give you the data that you can then leverage
Yeah.
to your advantage. So again, just because we know that most Gen Z really do prefer to communicate via text and via Slack, doesn't mean that your Gen Z members or all of your Gen Z members
Right.
will. So you've got to ask. You
That's
have to
right.
talk to your team, and customizing communication is the future.
Yeah.
That does not sit well with a lot of experienced professionals, because again, to your point, you did it. It was sink or swim. You came in, you did what you had to do. And what I'm kind of equating this to is everything in our life, whether you're a young professional or not, is customized now and
Hmm.
you're in media, right? So from Netflix and all the streaming devices
That's
that we
right.
watch to Spotify,
Very
everything is
personalized.
customized.
Yep.
And so I know we're not even talking about chaos, and so we can maybe shift courses, because I know that's really the point of the podcast. But all of the questions you're asking are just, it's why it's why this has really taken off, and why
Yeah.
people are hungry for this information.
And that's so interesting that you say that too, of what we've, this was my big lessons learned this year was, so we changed kind of how we did onboarding and orientation.
Uh-huh.
But, as we have been telling these like hard truths, right? As
Hmm.
part of those conversations of like, hey, we do, one of our modules is active listening and
Mm.
and serving and being curious, because one of our value propositions
Yeah.
is being ultimate, like ultra curious.
I love
But
that.
that's not just about the client's business and all that. That's about the people that surround you. Like,
Hmm.
walk in their shoes. What is their world like? Not just
Hmm.
how to serve the client, but your creative director, your art director,
Hmm.
your social media person, your media,
Hmm.
like, walk in their world. How do
Yeah.
they want to work?
Uh-huh.
But it was interesting, we've had to do a slight pivot of, we've had to bring some of these stories into the interview process, because
Mm.
we within, because like I said, the first 90 days, we're kind of doing some of
Hmm.
these more of like, we want to get you armed for things
Yeah.
that you might, this is what happens in an agency. This is what
Hmm.
questions you might get asked. Here's how to, this is why we're giving you this information. We've had people that have left and said, whoa, like, you guys do way intense, like your clients are very business
Hmm.
oriented. And I'm like, well, every client is business. Like, if you're in the agency
Right.
world, like, I don't know an agency that doesn't work with
Yeah.
businesses that care.
Hmm.
And so they were like, you guys really emphasize business. I don't think this is, I was thinking agency life was fun and it was just,
Uh-huh.
this like just creative environment. Like,
Hmm.
we're getting tough. Like,
Hmm.
you're arming us with information and it's all about business. And I'm like, well, our our company thrives on making other companies succeed.
Yeah.
If their businesses aren't growing,
Hmm.
they are not our customers. So they won't
Right.
be, but it was
Hmm.
interesting. But
Hmm.
we've had to bring those stories up
Hmm.
front during the interview stage to make
Hmm.
sure that people are aligned with our culture. And I've talked to, I don't know if that's something that you also coach companies
Absolutely.
on, is, look,
It's
it's not just
critical.
about once they get hired. It's,
Hmm.
how do you make sure that it's a good fit for both parties?
Absolutely. So I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, what the Yo Prono does is we help companies better attract, understand, develop, and retain top young professional talent. You can't develop unless you get them in, right? And they have to, so much happens in that recruiting period. I'll tell a brief story. I had one client that was in the financial services space, and we found that their recruiting process was a very, very big contributor
Mm,
to their high turnover rates. Strictly the communication that was taking place
okay.
during the recruiting period. And so that was part of the work that we did in our consulting space was we reconstructed that recruiting process, because we find that so much can be pointed back to that, where you go back to my first job and there were so many expectations that I had coming into that job that I found very shortly after I arrived
You're
those were not the case. And
right.
so I
You're like, if
love
they
that
would have
you
just
are
said that, I would not have taken this
right.
job because
Right.
it has to
You
be
have
a
to weed
two-way
people
street.
you have to weed people out. I think people really sometimes are desperate. I've had clients who are
Mm,
desperate to fill that spot, and they will overlook some really important um, attributes
okay.
that maybe are not necessarily the most positive for their team. And so I encourage people be as honest as you can
Mm,
in the recruiting period, in the onboarding period, and just always be honest, right? But if
right.
you aren't, then you risk struggling and then investing a lot of your time in onboarding, in hiring, in that first year, only to
That's
have
right.
them leave. And then that hurts you financially, among
It
other
does.
things.
So let's get back to your So what's been the most rewarding part of your journey?
Oh man, I think every year it's different, it's changed, but I would say in this moment, I really feel like we're making an impact. We're at the point where, I guess I kind of led you up to the 2020 era,
Yeah.
and over the last 3 years, almost 4 years now, we pivoted in that time frame. Our first business model was actually pay. It was our paying customers were young professionals. I originally thought
Okay.
that the young people were going to need our services. Like, let's help you kind of navigate the young professional world.
Right. Like be part
And
of
then,
this community, this network kind of a
yeah,
thing. Okay.
yeah. And so, and I really, while I feel like we really helped certain young professionals, I quickly realized this was not going to be sustainable. Young people weren't going to be able to pay me enough to build a business.
Yeah.
And so I ended up pivoting really in early 2021, and I pivoted towards the business model that we have now. Took a long time to get there, but it's companies. So it's companies that are able to pay. They're able to reach more young professionals. So the mission has never changed. It's always been let's help young professionals be successful because they're the future leaders of our workforce. So it's going to end up impacting everybody, right? Because people that will go on to be leaders of these companies that are incredible and that will kind of see us into the next wave and in the future. So that was always the goal, and allowing going to companies has just allowed us to reach more. And so I think that from the very beginning we've made an impact, but it's just really cool that since that first company that we worked with in early 2021, we are seeing really cool results. We're seeing
Mm,
thousands of employees stay at these companies and make more of an investment. Doesn't mean they're going to stay for 30 years. And none of the young professionals that we have, or none of the companies we've helped engage and retain talent, none of them are old enough to be there for 30 years.
mm,
But we are seeing a lot of those results. So I think that's really impactful. And then I would just say in this current moment, we're really getting involved in a lot of the workforce development efforts.
okay.
We have people across the nation that are coming to us for our research,
Mm,
and it's making an impact in areas outside of corporate. It's making an impact in voting and
wow.
politics, because people want to understand what young professionals are looking for. And to me, to be able to say, wow, we kind of moved the needle
Mm,
here, that's really been my moment that I feel like we're making the most impact.
that's fantastic. Yeah, we last month's edition in Orange Web, the platforms and the three markets, it was all focused on talent and workforce
Mhm.
development.
Mhm.
So for that, what are you seeing as like the biggest trend among workforce development within the young
Mhm.
professional space?
Oh man, that's a good question. I really think right now flexibility
Mm,
is really something that a lot of companies are battling with.
We
I
talk
was
about
just talking to
flexibility, like hybrid, like remote working
Mhm,
kind of flexibility.
mhm.
Okay.
Um, and where I was going with that is we work with companies that have the 100% remote all the
Mm,
way to people in manufacturing that are in the warehouses. They're on the assembly lines.
yeah.
So obviously flexibility looks different for all of those places. In 2024, and what we've seen this year is a lot of companies who said, we'll never go back to in office 100%.
Yeah.
They're all starting to make these changes. Young people are angry. They
Mm,
said that wasn't what was mentioned in my recruiting period, right? So if they were recruited in the last 3 years, 4 years,
they were promised this remote
they
flexibility. Okay.
correct. So people, so it's a nice segue into what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
And then my manufacturing and construction and engineering clients, what they're saying is, we might we're losing out on top talent, but how can we offer flexibility in other ways? And so
Hmm,
some companies are pro doing that, and that can look like, are you open to flex time? Are you open
okay.
to different benefits and different perks that you can offer them that maybe you can't offer them the chance to work remote because you just don't physically have that opportunity. But I think flexibility is going to be something that this next generation really is looking for.
Right.
It does not mean they want to work 100% remote. It just means they want some type of flexibility. They don't want to be micromanaged.
Mm,
And when experienced leaders say, all right, we want you to come back in the office, 8 to 5 every day, including Fridays, when we've had Mondays and Fridays off for the last 4 years, you're
yeah.
going to lose some people.
That's right. It's because once you give something, that's kind of like my lessons learned over the 30 years I've been like, once you give something to employees, it is very difficult to take something like a benefit.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yes, it's supposed to be a benefit, but once it's kind of lived and experienced,
Hmm.
that becomes expected. And when you take
Yeah,
that away,
absolutely.
you piss off people.
Hmm.
Um, so what do you think is the biggest misperception people have about being an entrepreneur or a founder, and how would you debunk it?
Hmm. Um, well, the one that comes to mind right away, I think there's probably a lot of answers I could give you, Jennifer, but I think currently I would probably say, because I have a lot of people that have asked me this in the last year and a half, because I've
Yeah,
only been doing this full time for 18 months,
right,
is, oh, do you love just like being your own boss and being so flexible and, talking about flexibility.
right.
And for a long time, I was like scared to leave my desk during the day because
Yeah,
although I'm my own boss and I have a team and no one's going to be like, "Oh, you went to yoga in the middle of the day." But I have dozens of clients that,
right.
I want to make sure I'm available for. And so I think the misconception is, at least among a lot of my peers, among a lot of my family members and friends,
Right,
they think, "Oh, you can just do whatever with your schedule and
right.
it doesn't
You're like,
matter." And that
"No."
is absolutely not true. I work very odd hours. I think my now husband would tell you that. Like he works for a very large corporate company, and so we have very polar opposite experiences. And so, his job is black and white. It's like when he leaves his computer at work and it's done.
Right.
For a long time, I was just like
You're
on my
on.
phone
Well, you're
constantly, and
on.
you're
Yeah,
on. And I've had to really work hard at that. It changes as seasons go. Like
yeah.
this is a slower season with the holidays, and so I was able to go to yoga for lunch today. And during the fall and the spring, that doesn't happen. And so I think that's just something a lot of people don't really understand. They just think, oh, you're your own boss. You can just do whatever you want. And
Yeah.
that is certainly not the case, at least in my experience.
No, and that's it's so funny that you say that. I think the first few years that I started, um, Bright, back in like I started that in 2013,
Uh
yeah, a lot
huh.
of, like, my family and friends, that was that they were like, "Well, why," "you started it because you have want this freedom and, are you just taking off at 2 to" I was like, "No, I'm trying to grow this company, and a lot of the
Right.
stuff is on me to grow. Yeah, I've got a team, but I
Hmm.
got responsibility," you know?
Mhm.
to do the hustle. And it was, yeah, to explain that to people, it was, you know, I knew it was hard work, like,
Mhm.
because you heard that, like, you would hear that from like, hey, if you think this is like, uh, that if you think that you're going to only work 20, 30 hours and try to grow a company, that's like,
Mhm.
you need to that's not for you. Go do a
Right.
gig, but you're not starting a
Mhm.
company.
Right.
So I kind of already knew that. I didn't realize how intense um, the work would have to be over like, especially the first like 3 years. It
Yeah,
was,
the emotions are high, and if I can share one thing, just because I think
yeah,
it's relevant to this topic and what your audience is looking for, I was just in a roller coaster of emotions
mm,
the first year.
yeah,
Like the past 6 months, we've been in a really awesome place. But again, like we talked about before this episode, I know that it's not going to stay this way forever.
right.
So we're in a really cool position because one of the reasons the first year was so chaotic was and just a roller coaster was because I did hire a lot of people at once,
Mm.
and
Whew, girl,
I
you were
don't
brave.
I was brave, and I genuinely like, people ask me all the time, like, "Why did you do that?" I'm like, it was maybe a little bit of naivete. I think it was me being young. I also think I don't have a family to support, right? Like, there are some risks that you can take when you're a younger entrepreneur,
Mhm.
and so I do feel thankful for that, and it obviously, I mean, I learned the hard way because onboarding 5 people at once is in
Yes. Whew.
different positions.
Yeah,
I mean, it was a nightmare at certain times, and so the good news is, because of that hard work, we have been in a really great spot as we have grown, as our demand has gotten higher, and so we have the infrastructure in place now as these new companies are coming on board, but again, there's going to be a moment where we don't have enough people again, and so
right.
I
You're
have
gonna
to.
scale up again. Yeah.
Yep. So it was a wave of emotions for the first year, and doesn't mean that it hasn't happened in the last 6 months, but I feel like it's been a little calmer, and I know that
Yeah.
it'll ramp right back up.
It will. We gotta welcome the chaos at all times.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
what's been your greatest kind of aha moment?
I would say it's definitely come in the last 6 months. All of the work that I put in since 2018 has really felt like it's starting to kind of just come to fruition. I feel like I'm now seeing the fruits of those
You're like, "My
labors.
vision, my
Right.
vision."
Right. And so that's been really cool. And a lot of people ask me, what is your view of success?
Yeah.
And I think the first year it was money. It was how many yeses was I getting versus how many no's I was getting. That was also partially why the wave of emotions happened. And I go back to that roller coaster reference. But in the last 6 months, I've people are coming to us for the first time, and it's a
That's
really cool feeling that I've just been in like this calm phase. It's the calmest I've been in my entire career, which I know people are laughing. It's like you've been a young, you've only been working for
right.
8 years, but it's it's a cool place to be, and so I think that this is where I'm kind of laying the foundation for the future. I know I'm being so corny and keep saying chaos, but like the future chaos that will
Yeah.
ensue. um, I think I'm just kind of laying the foundation for how to adapt to it when it happens next. But it's really cool that I feel like we've hit the mark. Like I tested the market for so long,
Yeah.
and now I feel like we have this product and service that people really want. So that's probably been my biggest aha moment.
It's a scalable business.
We're getting there.
Getting there. Okay, you talked about hiring, 5 people at once. Was that your biggest "oh shit" moment, or have you had another like, "Oh my gosh, this was the biggest challenge I think I've ever faced.
Mhm.
Oh shit."
I would say so. Yeah. So essentially, I was from July 22 until December, I was a one man show, and we had 8 clients. And that is, I mean, you're an agent life. Like I was managing accounts, I was doing the
Yeah.
consulting, I was doing the marketing. I had one contractor. It was chaos. And
Mm,
so
yeah.
January of this year, I made the decision, I'm going to bring people on because I need it. And so I would say that was probably the biggest oh shit moment in that first quarter. I was drowning. I was I felt like I was underwater
Yeah.
the entire quarter. But then I really found people on my team who I always say, like, date before you marry your
Mhm.
your team. And so I dated a lot of people before I brought them on. And I'm
Okay.
grateful that I did. And by that I mean we talked for like 4, 5, 6 months where it was like, here's what the expectations are now,
Yeah.
but this is a startup and it could look really different by January.
Yeah.
And so because I was so honest about that from the get-go, I think that's why our really strong team members have stayed. And we're in the position where we're continuing to hire, and we just have a better idea of the persona of our team members are now,
Yeah.
and what and I know you
So
probably
that's so
experienced
important.
that
Yeah.
too. Mhm. It is.
Defining your personality as a company and what traits
Mhm.
and
And we're
characteristics.
gonna keep growing, but
Yep.
I think that was probably the biggest "oh shit" moment, followed by just the harsh realities of running a business financially in the first
Yeah.
year. I think I had a lot of those moments too, and it's really awesome though because we're going into next year, like, it's my
Yeah.
first just, like, legit budget we've ever created because we have historical data
Yeah.
now, where last year I was trying to put something together and it
You're
was
like, I
just
don't
kind of a
know.
hot mess.
That's
So it's really just, I mean, I look at this past year and the past 18 months with such a positive light, even though, you know, I'm sure I wouldn't be saying that 10 months ago, 12 months ago, but it really has just been a really amazing journey. And I'm happy that I can like look back on it in a positive way.
Yeah. Okay, so if you had to sum up your entrepreneurial journey in one word, what word would that be and why?
Oh gosh, you're just hitting me with these hard questions. One word, I'm not a
I
one
know,
word gal.
one word.
Okay, I know. I'm gonna let me think on it. I know it's live, but we have
You
to think
you
about
can
this.
think, okay, we'll come back to that one. So, what keeps you up at night? Is there anything that you're like, "Oh my
Keeping,
gosh, I'm
uh
stressed out." Like, what
hmm
really keeps you up at night?
um, keeping food on the table for my team. Like first things first, I have to pay my team. Like
Yep.
that is critical. And so there's not been a time where we've ever lost, more than a client. I mean, at any point, but my fear is like, what if all of our clients leave? And that's just something that's I
I
think an
I think everybody
entrepreneurial
I
fear.
think everybody worries about, and I think that's
Mhm.
the shift of the mindset of, like, becoming more of a CEO mindset
Yes.
versus, and I talk to, like, solopreneurs and stuff, and that's just not even something they work because it's like they just have to
Mhm.
take care of their own
Right.
bills, but I think
Mhm.
it's that leap of you've started a business,
Yep.
you've taken a risk,
Uh-huh.
um, and that risk is other people are depending on you, and it's
Yeah.
scary.
It's scary. So I do think that's what keeps me up at night. I mean, I really have. There's been a lot of nights where I stay up because I'm thinking of that or something else that's in the business. Like, and
Yeah.
and that's something I'm continuing. Like next year, the goal is for me to get out of the day to day
Yep.
more and more.
Work on the
Um,
business, not in the business.
Correct.
That's
Correct. And
always yeah.
that's what I love the most. I love working on the business.
Mm,
It really drives me. That's when I think I realized that the past quarter, past couple of months, that's when I feel like I became an entrepreneur
mm,
because I don't really think you're an entrepreneur right away. Like I think you have to kind of
yeah.
work for it. And for me, the moment was when I was like going through the sales funnel process and no one had taught me like, here's how you push leads down a sales funnel. And I looked at it like a science and I was like,
Yeah,
"Oh my gosh, I'm into this and I really want to figure out how to make this better." And I was like, "Okay, I'm an entrepreneur now."
that's
Um,
right.
so I think going back to your other question, Jennifer, about one word, what would I describe? Um,
Yeah,
and I feel like risk is probably that word. I mean, I
it's a
risked
great word.
a lot.
You did,
I
yeah.
risked a lot, and if I can take another approach, I also feel like I wouldn't be here without a lot of mentors. And
Mm,
so, mentorship, if I can throw in a second word and cheat,
yeah,
mentorship would be another one because that's really Like, I did not get here alone. It was because of a lot of people.
Oh, that's fantastic. We talk to a lot of founders and stuff, and networking
Mhm.
plays such a big role in the
Mhm.
entrepreneur journey and mentorship. Do you have any advice of how did you um, connect with mentors or network, or how
Mhm.
did you build these meaningful connections that helped
Mhm.
you get to where you are?
It really started in college for me where if I don't know if you have people that are listening who are in high school or college,
Could
but
be,
I
yeah,
really I started with I guess I just had this love of networking early on where one person from an internship introduced me to somebody who said, "Oh, you need to meet so and so."
yeah,
And that just started my love for kind of connecting with others, and it's carried on since then. So I feel like I've had a lot of informal and formal mentors over time. I've been told that I'm very pleasantly persistent. And I think I reached out to a lot of people that probably had no business meeting with me, like, CEOs of like small to mid-sized companies in Greenville when I was in college or like really early on in my career. And those are people that either have hired me in
Mm,
recent years or they have connected me to others. And, they're reaching out now saying, "Hey, I'm super interested in what you're doing." And so it was kind of laying those foundations early. And my one piece of advice I would share is it just can't happen overnight. And I know that
yeah,
sounds so simple, but I know a lot of people who are starting networking later in life and they feel like there's this time crunch. And
right.
it's like you can't expect to go to coffee with somebody and then have them follow up with you a month later. Like I have people reach out to me 7 years later,
Yeah,
and
same
it's
here.
just
Yeah,
it's all part of the process, I think, and it's easier to say that when you're looking back on it now, but think about if you start now, no matter what age you
right.
are, in another 5 years, like, what is that gonna look like? So I think it's kinda like compounding, right? Like compound
Yeah,
interest, the relationships that you make over time start to have a lot of value, but you can't do it just for business, right? You have to do it because you want to get to
make a
know
cut.
people and
Right.
have those relationships.
Building relationships. Yeah, 'cause I
Mhm.
like how you said that you were pleasantly persistent of 'cause
I
that's
have
the
some
other
funny senior leaders who have told me that, like people
real
that you probably know. It's funny. I'm like, I've heard this once or twice.
but that's a great, I mean, to me, that's like the perfect, description of what you need to do. I mean, that
Mhm,
is we encourage, interns and some of the
mhm,
younger people that we work with of and even folks that get laid off at job, they're in their 40s or 50s. We're like,
mhm.
you got to make building relationships and making connections like it's your job.
Yeah.
Like you need to go to events, you need to, comment on people's, um, post on LinkedIn. You need to connect. Like, you can't just go, well, they know I'm not here. I sent them one email and I'm like, "Oh, well, you better send them 10
Right.
and
Right.
take them out for, or not even take them out to coffee. Go to where they're going to be and
Mhm,
build a relationship." Um,
mhm.
but yeah, like do it like it's your job. But
Absolutely.
it's
I love
but
that.
it's but it's hard. Like it is I'm
Mhm.
an introvert, so it's really hard to sometimes I'm the person at the event that's like holding up the wall.
Right. Well, and it's also I would never know that about you first off, and I think that's what's hard, I think, about being an introvert in this space, and
Yeah.
networking just it doesn't come natural.
It is not a natural. It
So
like
so you have
drains.
to play it out a little
Which
bit, but
yeah,
it sounds like you do because I know that you have such a presence in this community, and you didn't get that just by sitting at home.
right, right.
So you
Well,
you've
thank
you've
you.
made it a job.
I've tried. I've tried. All right, so Camber, what gets you out of bed in the morning?
I purpose. I mean, purpose. I feel hopefully after, an hour of talking to me, you can see there's just a lot of passion behind what I'm doing,
Mhm,
and I really feel like we're making a difference. So to me, that's what gets me out of bed. And it was very different a year ago. What got me out of bed was the fear of missing
mm,
an email from a client or like not responding for
right,
more than 5 hours, right? Like that's
right.
still kind of long, but I I really feel like purpose is what gets me out of bed each day.
I love it. So, what do you want your company to look like a year from now? Fast forward,
Mhm.
what does it look like? Is it, team expansion? Are you another market? Like, what does it look like?
So one thing that happened this year was we really in the past 18 months, we grew very fast because as soon as I took it full time, it was like night and day.
Mm,
So I know that another year
that's
is
good.
going
Yeah.
to make a really big difference. And something that happened this year was, and it was a little unexpected. I knew this would happen eventually, but our speaking and workshops blew up,
Okay.
and we are traveling all over the country next year. So I try to limit it to no more than 5 per month. We're already kind of pushing that for next year, which is exciting being in
That's
December.
fantastic. Yeah.
A little scary though, because I don't like to put a limit on anything. I typically am like, I just want to do everything. But what I have found and what my team is now seeing is just we spoke to over 2,000 people this year, 22 organizations across the country, and that produced thousands of leads for us that we didn't have the previous year.
Right.
And so that is creating a really high demand both on our workshop side of the business and our consulting side.
Hmm.
So we're really anticipating big growth, which means a lot of team expansion, hopefully within a reasonable amount. That's what our goals are right now. And then I really believe that our clients will tell us what we need to do next. So next year is all about listening to our clients,
Hmm.
where are the pain points, and then ultimately creating a product that we can sell based on the work that we're currently doing. So figuring out how do we automate the process that we're
Yeah.
currently doing in our consulting, which is like the $1 million question for professional services. And so we're starting that process, but I'm not in a rush because I think it will happen the way it's supposed to, like everything else has happened the way it's supposed to.
That's great. That's so good. You're such a planner. Um,
Well, I don't know.
yeah,
Not
yeah,
all
like,
the time.
so what do you do in your free time
Oh, well,
when you're
I
not
love to
working?
read. I love to read. I've really reading has become like I do it every day, even if it's just for 30 minutes before I start my day. I love reading for fun. I spend a lot of time with my friends. Was
You're a
planning a wedding this
newlywed?
past year. Yeah, I was like that. I'm honestly, gosh, we're so happy that we don't have to plan a wedding anymore. Planning a wedding in the first year of the business was like
That's like,
nothing I have
yep,
ever.
you just needed to move
Mm-mm.
too.
Yeah.
And
Yep. So I just was like, we're ready to. I'm excited to see what my life is going to look like because
like
the wedding was literally 2 weeks ago.
little
So
oh,
it'll
wow.
it'll be very fun. So that was a big part of our year, and we also travel. Like we're in the season of life where a lot of our friends are getting married, and so we've traveled all over the place for our friends' weddings, and so it's a fun season of life for sure.
Yeah. Oh, and yeah. So did you get married in the area, the Greenville, or did you do a um,
We were here,
remote?
so
You did. Okay.
yeah. So just right
Nice.
downtown at Avenue. It was really nice.
Oh, beautiful. That's such a beautiful space.
Yeah, we were it was the perfect day. We were really excited, and that's been really, I think, just super interesting. Again, planning the wedding during this year, I think it just put a lot of things in perspective, and
Yeah.
planning a wedding is kind of like running a business, and so it,
Yeah.
it gave me a little perspective. It was kind of funny.
Like you're the ultra organized. Now let me ask you this. So how has your now spouse, he had
Mhm.
to basically he was your partner, at
Mhm.
least emotionally through your first
Absolutely.
entrepreneur, like your big entrepreneur journey, your founder.
Mhm.
How
Mhm.
was that?
It's a really good question. I
You
mean,
didn't scare
so
him.
I didn't scare him. We met right when YoPro was kind of taking off for me. And so from the very beginning, I mean, he's seen all of the iterations that we've talked about today,
Yeah.
and he's been on board since the beginning. So I was never concerned with that. I mean, it's why we, got married. But
Right.
I really said in that full year that we were engaged, it was really where that roller coaster took place. And
Mm.
so he saw all sides of the business. He
He
saw all
knows.
sides of me. And I was like, this is the person that I want to marry because he's seen this. And he kind of knows and supports me in what I'm doing. So I've learned, and I've had a lot of advice from mentors who have sold businesses. They,
Mm.
they're currently are in a business and they're older than me, and they're like, you can't bring all of your entrepreneur problems home,
Yeah. You got to
because
create the boundaries.
he can't be the only one that hears this. And so that's something I have practiced a lot, and I
Yeah.
hope to continue doing that in my marriage, just because he is my partner, but he's not my business partner. And
Right.
I think that it's always kind of important. So I don't know if you've ever experienced that, or if you have
Oh,
kind of
yes. My husband works
similar
for me.
thoughts.
So it's,
Really? Oh, so that's like a whole
yes,
other
it's
story.
a whole nother story. Yes. And so he, not from the beginning, but he was like, obviously he was instrumental, help, encourage
Mhm.
me to start the
Mhm.
company. But he left his company 5 years ago, I think, to
Mhm.
become our financial officer.
Mhm.
Um, so, loads of stories there. Yeah.
Yeah, another
It's the good,
time. Very
the good, the
interested.
bad, the ugly. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
it's just different, and we think differently. We do have to create
Mhm.
boundaries. You have
Mhm.
to, set that time, that space.
Mhm.
But it's still a journey for us. We're learning.
Yeah, and I think I mean, it's a journey for my husband too. Like, he's experienced, just like, it's new to him.
Right.
He's in finance, but he's like, I don't understand the tax side of your business.
It
Like,
is a
so
whole different
it's
world. Yeah.
it's a journey for us both, and I'm
Yeah.
grateful that I have found a partner that is um supportive of this, because it is a lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, so you talk about mentorship. What's the best piece of advice you've received from one of your mentors, and how has that influenced your own decision making?
Mhm. So am pretty involved with the Next Innovation Center here in Greenville. So
Yeah.
I'm part of the mentoring program. I have 3 mentors right now. So that's a formal mentor program that I've had, but I've had so many amazing informal mentors as well. But I would say one that the Next mentors really share with me often is, you've got to take yourself away from working in the business and on the
On the
business. So
business. Yep.
we've already kind of talked about that today, but I have to, like, block out time where I'm like, okay, I'm in the business right now and I'm on the business
Yep.
at at another date. It's really hard to go back and forth.
It is. And it's the
So
biggest
that's
shift.
something I try.
Yeah, and it's a biggest shift for founders. I mean,
Mhm.
there are some founders that like it, in the
Mhm.
business,
Mhm.
and they struggle with the scalability because they haven't identified what they're it's like it they don't even realize that they're in it,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so, yeah, we've heard advice of like start, and that's what I've done. It's like, what are all those tasks? And then it's like,
Yep.
okay, I got to delegate
Mhm.
these tasks to get
And
me out of it.
that's really hard. They also push me to delegate, and I have my, director of operations, who really is my right hand
Right.
man. She always tells me, she's like, you got to let go. And I
It's
view
hard.
her as a mentor in a way,
Yeah.
because it's important to, like, listen to your team. And so I think those two areas are important. But regarding the first one, I try to have certain days, if I don't have a lot of meetings,
Mm.
those are like my deep work days, and that's typically when I get a lot of that vision planning, a lot of the strategy, the vision.
Yeah.
And so far that works, but a lot of times it's hard, because if you're like, well, I've got 3 lead meetings, I'm going to do that, and I'll
Right.
push out the deep work, and that's a bad habit to get into.
Yeah, I hear you. Um, so you love to read, but I'm gonna ask you, so what's
Mhm.
one book or a podcast or a resource? I mean,
Mhm.
any resource that has a profound impact on your growth as a founder or as a leader?
Oh, well, there's been a lot. I really feel like I'm such a podcast girl these days. So I feel like I listen to so many podcasts more than I do books. But I'll answer kind of both, the
Yeah,
podcast and the book, because they're the same. Um, How I Built This by Guy Raz,
such a great.
NPR.
Oh my goodness.
Favorite podcast. I really have just I felt, we didn't even talk about this today, but I felt very lonely in the first year of my business,
Yeah.
like very depressed, and lonely. And How I Built This kind of was like my friend during that time, and it was just amazing. And so his book is How I Built This by
Mm,
Guy Raz, and it's founders who built this.
yeah.
And so it's each chapter is kind of the high level takeaways from some of his best interviews. And that's my kind of book. It
Yeah.
has it's stories, right? So like that's something that really drives me. And I always kind of look to some of those major founders, Sarah
Yeah.
Blakely with Spanx, and I
Yep.
just listened to the one on solo stoves and Viore clothes and just all these industries and everything that comes with the challenges that they have now successful
That's
gotten
right.
past. And it's very inspiring. So to me, that's probably been the most profound resource.
That's great, and it's so fun that you say that. Like that's one of the reasons I started Orange Whip as a company
Really?
was because of the isolation and the loneliness I felt as a
Mhm.
founder when I started Bright in 2013. I
Mhm.
didn't get into like it wasn't until like Nika White with when
Yeah.
she was with the NBA, with the chamber, she was like, "You really need to be a part of this program." And
Uh-huh.
it really like opened my eyes of I sat in a cohort with 25 other founders
Mm.
we were all like going, we feel alone, we feel
Mhm.
isolated. I don't feel like there's a safe space to ask questions
Yeah.
or to just not vent, but just go, I
Mhm.
can't share some of the things that are in my head
Mhm.
with my team.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh my God, I'm not the only one. And then, you know, I did other kind of like cohorts, accelerator programs
Mhm.
nationally. And I just kept hearing the same repetitiveness of like
Mhm.
founders in San Diego, founders
Yeah.
in Boston, Austin, didn't matter,
Mhm.
and it was the lack of connective tissue within a local ecosystem, and that's why I
Mm.
was like, okay, that's what sparked the creation of Orange Whip
Yeah.
and why the podcast is like it's stories. It's what are the
Mhm.
founder journeys, but we hear that from almost every founder we interview in the 3 South Carolina markets,
Mhm.
or I mean, this is our, what, 78th podcast,
Mhm.
um, that we've talked to founders, and that's the number, like, the loneliness, the
Yeah.
isolation, the mental health,
Mhm.
anxiety, and,
Yeah.
those issues of being a founder, and it's like, okay, how do we normalize that? How do we
Mhm.
create this connected
Mhm.
community of
Yeah.
founders? And do these like same things of why you started the Yo Pro No of
Mhm.
you felt that with the young professionals. We felt that with founders and entrepreneurs.
Mhm.
um,
Mhm. Thank
but
you for sharing. I mean, I really think that's what's gotten me through that kind of depression era,
yeah,
truly. And I don't say that lightly. It's hearing other founder stories and
yeah.
kind of knowing that I'm
It's
not
like I'm
alone
not
that's really
alone. We
helped me. Mhm.
we hear that that's like the number one phrase. You are not alone. I'm not
Mhm.
alone.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. Um, All right, so I can't believe it. We're out of time. These things
Yeah.
go by so fast. I
They
do. It's like,
do.
so I appreciate you hanging out and chatting with me, but where can people get a hold of you? Is there also any lasting advice you want to give or comments you
Mhm.
want to make while we have you?
Well, I definitely feel like I talked as much as I could, so I think I gave a lot of advice. I don't know
You
if I need
did.
to wrap up with any because everything that we touched on is really truly, I mean, to my core, my journey has been, and it's been really amazing. But I always say that every journey is really different,
That's right.
and while there might be some overlapping themes, my journey is not going to be the same as somebody else's, and
Hmm.
just know that. But I'm really active on LinkedIn. I love connecting with people that way. So you can find me, Camber Parker, and go to our website, www.yoprono.com. We have a lot of free resources. I always encourage people to take a look. We've got thousands of blog posts and interviews. We have our own podcast called The Great Retention with Camber
I've
Parker.
listened. I
So
love it.
oh, good. Yay. And so we have some really awesome guests. We actually just released an episode this week on external and internal networking and its
Oh,
impact on retention. And so kind of relevant to some of what we talked about today with the networking
absolutely.
component. But yeah, I would love anybody to reach out to me. We are always looking to learn from people, and no matter if you're a young professional or you're a seasoned experienced professional.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Camber, for being on, and we'll definitely tag everything so people can find you as we go forward.
Awesome.
And so for
Thank you so
everyone,
much.
you are so welcome. For everyone listening to us or watching us live, thank you for joining. Just a reminder, this podcast will drop this coming Sunday and available on all podcast platforms. So subscribe to Hello Chaos, help us grow and build a more connected entrepreneurial community. Hello Chaos is one of the many resources brought to you by Orange Whip. That's WIP for Work in Progress. Orange Whip is a national multimedia company dedicated to serving founders and entrepreneurs in affiliate cities. We are 100% free. Just an email to join the community. One-stop content hub for founders delivered also in a weekly email every Sunday. We're currently in 3 South Carolina cities with goals to expand to other markets in 2024 because every city needs an Orange Whip. We are the connective tissue for a local entrepreneurial ecosystem. Subscribe and join our community of founders today. If you'd like to be a guest on our podcast or support us, send us an email to hello@orangewhip.com. Again, that's orangewhipwip.com. Y'all, thank you for tuning in to Hello Chaos. It's where aha meets oh shit. I will see you again next week.